Dakorien Moore is in the perfect situation to have a great Oregon career.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Are we locked into Dante Moore starting at quarterback? Jackson Shelstad returns. All coming up on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at TurboTax. Get ready for stress-free and the most money back guarantee. That's what TurboTax is about. Head to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. So, I don't think there's a player who's generating as much buzz or is capable of doing so in spring ball as Dakorien Moore. Eventually, the spring game, which is a lot closer than you might think, we're less than 20 days away from being there. He's the player I'm most excited to see. I think a lot of you feel that way as well. Highest rated wide receiver commit in the history of Oregon football, second highest rated recruit ever, behind only Kayvon Thibodeau. And I think he's in a great spot to have a fantastic career. So statistically, I'm not quite sure what to expect from him this fall. I have a hard time seeing him playing no role in the offense whatsoever. Certainly, though, I don't expect him to hit his ceiling as a true freshman. I expect him to have a part in the offense to play, but I think he's in such a perfect position because nothing's going to be required of him. He is not going to be asked to do anything he's not capable of producing right here, right now. He is not required in this receiving core to go out there and have an 800 to 1,000 yard season, which would be an Oregon freshman record from the data I've been able to find, by the way, that's available out there. If someone can find something else, by all means, you let me know. But from what I have tracked down, the best freshman receiving season in the history of Oregon football was Darren Carrington, and he had about 700 yards in his first year as a Duck. Everybody else, all the great receivers, they tend to pop later in their careers. That goes for Troy Franklin. That goes for Jeff Mayle, who didn't have a 1,000-yard season until his third or fourth year in college. That goes for Josh Huff, who had kind of a limited role as a true freshman. Braylon Addison into that camp as well, who was good, but was not, going for a 1,000-yard season right away. So that's not the expectation I place on him here. But the great part about Dakorien's situation, why he can thrive, is all the talent and experience he has around him will allow him to work himself into the fold. Kayvon Thibodeau had an incredible true freshman season in 2019, but he slowly worked himself into the rotation. He was not on the field all the time. He wasn't an every down player right away. He became that as the year went on. So in this receiver room, you've got Evan Stewart back from last year's team, your leading returning receiver, with Trayshawn Holden and Tez Johnson gone, and Terrence Ferguson as well. And you've got Kenyon Sadiq at tight end, who's a reliable target. Just at the slot position, you could put Gary Bryant Jr. in there, who's going into his sixth season of college football and his third with the Ducks. You could put Justice Lowe in there, who's going into his fourth season of college football and showed some real potential and did a lot of good things last year for Oregon in this receiving core, kind of quietly because he was behind the main guys. But when called upon, he stepped up in a big way. And guys have been singing his praises for a number of years. Kyler Casper and Jurion Dickey are trying to crack their way into the rotation, and I imagine they do in some capacity. But again, not having, kind of the added pressure of, Ryan Williams at Alabama, for instance, as a true freshman, had to do a lot because the Alabama receiving core, it was good. I don't think it's as good as it has been in years past, but they put a lot on Williams' shoulders. Or Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. They put a lot on his shoulders. And even Smith, I think, was a lot better over the second half of the season. But having the depth and talent and just veteran production that you have in the receiver room, specifically where Dakorien is likely to play, or where I think he plays, which is primarily in the slot. I think he can play anywhere. He's 5'10", 5'11", kind of in that Jamar Chase sort of mold, but not quite as tall. I mean, he's tall enough to play on the outside. He's got great ball skills, of course, but I see him as Tez Johnson elevated. That's kind of his ceiling in my view. So I think he is set up to absolutely succeed, not just this year, but over the course of his career, because allowing that trajectory, I think, is in everybody's best interest to come in, get acclimated to the game, figure out, okay, here's how this works, here's how that works. How do I manage my schedule? How do I, manage the weight room and keep myself in the right sort of shape? And I think that he's got all the reports about his work ethic and character that I've heard from people who cover him recruiting, really, really good. So no questions there. But he does not have to produce right here, right now for Oregon. And that leads me to a question that came in from Philosopher Roger out there. And you can be a part of the mailbag too. YouTube comments, Twitter, all that good jazz. Who sent in this question. Hey, Spence, what do you think of Evan Stewart playing in the slot position? I've heard some analysts mention that's what his preferred position / where he played at A&M. Well, going back to the depth of this Oregon receiver room, I didn't even mention Malik Benson, who's going into his, I believe, 5th year of college football, his 3rd at the Power 4 level, 3rd different school. He's still trying to find that production because he hasn't yet had a 400-yard season. He might have had that at Florida State this past season if they had, any sort of competent offense, which they did not. But Evan Stewart's a guy who, again, kind of like Dakorien Moore, not the biggest guy in the world, not the smallest. We saw him play a lot on the outside last year. He can absolutely line up in the slot and run those sorts of routes that are 10 to 12 yards and in, where Tez Johnson was so lethal for the last couple of years for the Ducks. And I think the depth of big-bodied receivers on the outside is enough. Justice Lowe isn't huge, but he is 6'1", inch taller than Evan Stewart. You've got Kyler Casper, who's 6'5", 6'6". You've got Jerion Dickey, who's over 6 feet tall. He's in the kind of 6'1" sort of range. You've got Malik Benson, who's 6'2", 6'3". If you wanted to play Evan Stewart more in the slot, you could. You could. I don't know that Oregon has a big need there, because if Justice Lowe plays in the slot, again, maybe he goes a little bit more outside. But Gary Bryant Jr. is not a slouch. This is a guy who was, back in his high school recruiting days, a borderline 5-star recruit. He wasn't quite there, but he was pretty close. His composite rating on 24/7 was like 97 point something. Like, really talented player, has made explosive plays over the last couple of years for the Ducks. If he's your starting slot receiver, you're in a pretty good place. But I think what I like about this receiving core is, number one, the depth. By the way, I haven't mentioned Jeremiah McLaughlin yet. That guy's got plenty of potential. And a number of other receivers too. I think what this receiving core has is a lot of depth and a lot of versatility. There are a lot of different packages. I think this position, more than any other group, can survive an injury or two and not have a significant talent drop-off from one guy to the next, or even a significant experience drop-off from one guy to the next. Like, let's say your top 3 receivers, your base 11 personnel, 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. Let's say your top 3 guys are Evan Stewart, Gary Bryant Jr., and Malik Benson. Let's say Gary Bryant Jr. gets hurt. Who are you going to? Justice Lowe? I mean, Bryant's probably a little bit of a better put, but is there a big gap there? I thought Justice Lowe did a bunch of great things last year. Or let's say Malik Benson were to get hurt. Is that where Kyler Casper comes in as the big-bodied guy? Kind of okay with that. Both incredibly talented, unproven. Not necessarily a huge drop-off there if that's the case. Or if Stewart goes down and McLaughlin comes in. McLaughlin was a borderline 5-star receiver recruit. So I think this room is in such a good spot for whoever winds up playing quarterback, probably Dante Moore, but we don't know for sure. But I think for Dakorien Moore specifically, a guy who is unlike any other receiver recruit in the history of Oregon football, number one at his position for the class, yeah, he is in a position to succeed because he can see how it's done the right way, and he can progress on whatever timeline is best for him in his career. So I'm pretty stoked about him. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. Are we locked into Dante Moore at quarterback? I mean, probably, but nothing is given. First, this episode brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, No wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. TurboTax.com. Very Oregon second segment sip with a Lake of the Woods logo on it. Great place. Great place in a great state. So, let's answer a couple of spring questions here. These came in from a Locked On Ducks Insider, which you can become as well. Link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. You get priority mailbag access and a bunch of other perks as well. First question comes from one of you over there. Wondering whether Austin Novosad can realistically push Dante Moore. So, I think the answer is yes. It's plenty feasible that Austin Novosad, throughout spring football, goes and pushes Dante Moore for the starting. It's perfectly feasible. The biggest problem Novosad is going to run into is, I think, an ingrained mentality from the coaching staff. Not saying they're wrong for having it. I just get the sense that they do. An ingrained mentality of Dante is supposed to be the guy. Because remember, in 2023, Novosad was the replacement quarterback for Dante Moore when he flipped to UCLA. So in the 23 cycle, when all the quarterbacks were out there and they were all offered, Oregon wanted Dante Moore more than they wanted Austin Novosad. That's factor number one. Factor number two, this journey that Dante Moore is on, I really get the sense it comes with some level of assurance or guarantee from the coaching staff that, hey, you're going to be the starting quarterback. A guy of that caliber, he could have gone to a number of places and started probably right away in 2024, who also would have seen him, as Oregon does, as a bit of a reclamation project who needs more work and development. But for Dante to have the maturity to say, hey, I want to go to a place where quarterbacks are thriving and I can learn from a veteran, and Oregon, of course, is that. And for the coaching staff to go to him, make that pitch and say, hey, we want you to come here and learn. That's ingrained mentality factor number two for the staff that makes me think, yeah, they're going to go in that particular direction. I don't expect an announcement anytime soon. I'm excited to watch both of them in the spring game. I think the biggest way that Novosad can push Dante Moore, though, when he's just going out and competing in practice and throwing the ball around and all that sort of stuff, protect the football. Because that was Dante Moore's biggest flaw when he was at UCLA. He got the starting job because he flashed all the potential. You go look at Dante Moore highlights on YouTube, boy, you see some special arm talent, man. I mean special arm talent. There are not a lot of guys like him. Quick release, he can drop it down, little Matt Stafford to him, not on Stafford's level because he has one of the most unique arms in the history of college football. Matt Stafford, that is. But Dante Moore was not a five-star quarterback, the number one quarterback by several outlets by accident. This is a guy who's got all the talent in the world, can play in the NFL. He's 6'1", 6'2", in that range, really good arm, quick release, can be deadly accurate. So I think that when you watch both of these guys and discuss their physical traits, that's where the extra star was given to Dante Moore and not Novosad. Now, the reason I will never rule out until we hear otherwise directly from the staff the idea that there could actually be a quarterback battle going on right now is that they didn't recruit Austin Novosad knowing Dante Moore would transfer back one day. Obviously, in the back of their minds, it's something they had pondered because it came about. But they recruited Austin Novosad thinking, okay, we don't have Dante Moore. We need someone who we believe can be the future starting quarterback for the Ducks. Novosad's got a lot of arm talent out there. I don't think he moves quite as well as Dante Moore. He doesn't have quite as clean of a motion. He doesn't have quite as strong of an arm. But we saw in the spring game last year, and we'll see what happens this year come April 26th. Novosad can be incredibly accurate with the football and be pinpoint with his ball placement. He made a couple of ridiculous throws last year in the spring game. One of them was a drop by Tiefrick, who had the drops in that game. I don't know what was going on, but he layered a ball over a DB, away from a safety, into the breadbasket. It was good coverage, and he still put it on the money. And you look at that throw, the back shoulder to McLaughlin, another back shoulder he threw to Justice Lowe, something that, frankly, the Oregon offense doesn't do a ton, hasn't ever really done a ton, but has the receiving core to do it now. I'd love to see him incorporate that because, frankly, I watch other teams, like Washington with Penix and those guys. I watch them do it all the time and just think to myself, man, why isn't Oregon doing that? Why can't they go out and do that more often? And it's not that they've never done it, but it has not been something I think they've incorporated a lot. And part of that is Will Stein's system, to be sure. But again, those are high-level throws, and not everybody in the country can make them. But Novosad, at least in that setting, showed that he can. But if Dante Moore hasn't fixed his turnover problem, well, that's the biggest way Novosad stands out, is he goes, he protects the football. You go out there, make good reads, show a command to the offense that makes it look like you have been there for 2 years, learning all the different calls and the reads and everything that goes into being quarterback. Show a mastery of that. I think those are the two biggest ways Novosad can separate from Dante Moore, because I know the ways Moore can separate from Novosad. And those are the areas where I think he'd have the biggest chance to push him at the very least. And, having a good backup quarterback, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. So, another question that came in from that same Locked On Ducks insider was, how good will the offensive line be? So last year coming into the season, I felt, the offensive line should be good. Won't be as good as last year. I feel vindicated with that take after watching 14 games of Oregon football last season. And I think that for the offensive line this year, I have the same expectation. I don't think they can be as good as last year's unit for the last month of the season in particular. At least not right away. You can't put four new... You could have as many as 4 new starters on this offensive line. I mean, my offensive line projection right now for your starting 5, I think your left tackle is Isaiah World. I think your right tackle is probably Alex Harkey, the Texas State transfer, maybe Janoris Wilson, who is going into his 3rd year with the Ducks. We'll see. But one of those guys at right tackle. Right guard, there was a video that was going around Twitter the other day with Matthew Bedford at right guard, Poncho at center. I know Poncho is starting. I know Isaiah World is starting. Those things are given. And Emmanuel Prenon, the USC transfer, is probably at the other guard spot. So you've got talent, you've got experience across the board. It could be a really good unit. Not going to fire on all cylinders right away. I don't think I've seen an offensive line that hasn't played together for a year or two come out week 1 and just be, boom, it's automatically good. You go back to 2022, that was a great offensive line that Lanning had in his first year, and they actually weren't the problem against Georgia in that game. They ran the ball well. Bo Nix just turned it over a couple times, and the offensive line was really good. But those guys have been there for a couple of years already. And so I think that was a big part of their success. So I like that the O-line has a lot of talent across the board, that they have a lot of experience. You got Poncho going to his 2nd year starting at center. You've got just a bunch of multi-year starters that have been proven elsewhere. I think they have solid depth as well. By the end of the season, probably one of the top 12 finalists for the Joe Moore Award. Will they play like that in the first month of the year? Wouldn't count on it necessarily. I think you'll have some growing pains, but you shouldn't have the mistakes that were made last year because you have Poncho starting at center. So everyone should be, in theory, more organized than last year when they were going back and forth with those two guys. So if you have thoughts on the quarterback situation, the offensive line situation, as always, you let me know. I love hearing from you guys. I also love the piece of news we got for Oregon basketball. First, though, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. All-in-one convenience is what they're all about. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year, monarchmoney.com. Big news, great news, happy day. Jackson Shelstad is back. This is the first known commodity that we now have to plan for Dana Altman's squad next year. And that's a non-zero. Look, I wasn't anticipating that Shelstad would go to the NBA draft. He's a little small. He's got plenty of NBA traits. 3-level scorer, a lot of range for a point guard. Really quick. I mean, really, really quick. I think he can make it to the NBA one day. I hope he stays at Oregon for 4 years. We're going to get at least a third season out of him. And this is a guy who was third team All Big Ten, was a preseason All Big Ten selection, lived up to the hype, shot the 3-ball better this season than he did last year, which is crazy because for about the first month of the year, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn from beyond the arc. And then Big Ten play started where you'd think, oh, well, you don't have any of those non-conference cupcakes. Now your stats are going to go down. No, his stats got better when Big Ten conference play began. I am more than a little excited that he's back because I wasn't worried. The thought was in the back of my mind, he could declare if Biddle goes to the NBA draft, we're still waiting to hear, and I'll get to him more in a moment. I thought, man, what if Shelstad were to go? Then you'd really be in a tough spot. But I think this is big for the recruiting that Oregon is currently doing, not as much from the high school ranks necessarily, but from the transfer portal. I think when you're going out and adding transfers, this is true in football when, you bring in a wide receiver. Wide receiver probably wants to know, well, who's the quarterback going to be? Who's getting me the football? In basketball, guys want to know, who am I going to play with? What kind of team am I going into? That's one of the reasons that, TJ Bamba and Brandon Angel came over last year is, number one, their familiarity with Dana Altman and the program he runs. But number two was, hey, I think this is a good team. And what do you know? They were a really good team. Unfortunately, lost in the second round to Arizona in a game that they very easily could have won. Now, would they have beaten Duke? I don't know, but I would have liked to see him give him a shot. So Shelstad coming back off a season where he scored almost 14 points a game, shot it well from deep, about 36, 37%. I look at what he did this past year, and I was thrilled with what he was exactly what I expected him to be. A guy who can score inside, outside, fast break, get hot from three. I'm an old school 2K player. None of the new, I haven't played 2K, NBA 2K in a long time because it just stopped being a good game a while ago, unfortunately. I love playing as a kid. Anyway, one thing they introduced in like 2K12 were these attributes, that certain players had. Jackson Shelstad has the microwave attribute. Once he gets hot, now does he disappear sometimes? Yep, no player is perfect. But when Jackson Shelstad gets hot, I expect every shot to go down. And the number of guards who are his size in college basketball who can shoot 45% from the field, it's few and far between. And he did it in the Pac-12 as a freshman. He did it in the Big Ten. This is a guy who I think took a step forward, playing in a better basketball conference, and can absolutely take another step forward as well. Frankly, I think it comes down to his mentality of, I got to score more. I need to have the ball in my hands as often as possible. I think that's way number one he can improve. Number two, I think he's got way more in the tank as a passer. He's a score-first point guard. Nothing wrong with that. I think Shelstad is a high-end, capable passer who averaged less than 3 assists per game last year. He only had 5 or more assists in a game 5 times last year. That's a really low number. Now, I do think a contributing factor to that is TJ Bamba wasn't able to shoot threes. So instead of having 4 guys on the court that could hit a 3 when you drive, you only had 3. But again, I think that his ability to be a playmaker for his teammates can and will improve. I think it got a little better year 1 to year 2. The numbers weren't that different, but I think that area of his game can take a step forward. But he works at the defensive end, even though he's small. He's active. He creates steals. He gets out in transition. He finishes with both hands. He's a tough shot maker. Like, this guy has lived up to the billing, and it's awesome that, even though I'm a Lake Oswego guy, so Westland is one of those things. But it's awesome that he is an Oregon high school guy and that he is this good, and he has, from the moment he stepped on campus, lived up to the bill. The clutch gene, it's all been there. So Shelstad coming back is huge, and being able to go to guys in the portal and say, hey, We've got our all Big Ten point guard coming back for his third season. You know why he's coming back? Because he knows what I'm telling you. We can make a run in the NCAA tournament. We've got the ability. They played great teams this past year. They beat a bunch of them. Maryland, Sweet 16 team. Oregon beat them. Alabama, Elite 8 team. Oregon beat them. Texas A&M, round of 32. Oregon beat them. Wisconsin, round of 32. Oregon beat them. They had one of the best resumes in the entire country. They hit a dry spell. Then they got hot. Dana Altman still knows how to coach, but he's got to have the guys. And Jackson Shelstad is a guy. So that's a great piece of news. Now, what that means for Oregon is they can go out and get guys with the pitch. Hey, Jackson Shelstad's coming back. You want to go play with that guy? You want to have him taking the big shot late? If you're not a, big shot sort of guy, like if you're going to find a role player, hey, you're going to love playing with this guy because he's going to be able to get you the ball, and he's also going to help us win games, which is what people want to do more than anything. But now I turn to Nate Biddle as the next biggest piece for Oregon to announce his return or potential departure. And KJ Evans, I feel solid. I'll say like 70% solid. KJ Evans comes back. He would not go to the NBA. No way he's ready for that. He could hit the portal if someone else offers him maybe more playing time or more offense. I think he is ready to be Oregon's starting power forward. And I very much want to have a starting core for this Oregon basketball team next year that is Jackson Shelstad at point, KJ Evans at the 4, Nate Biddle at the 5. Biddle is more important to bring back than Evans, but you really want both. You do not want to be in a position where you only bring one back and suddenly you have to go out and find basically 3 bigs, at least 2, maybe 3. Because if you lost Biddle, you'd have to replace him. That's 1. Supreme Cook has gone off the bench. That's 2. Maybe they'd have another one in the fold. Maybe they wouldn't, right? I mean, you lost Brandon Angel as well. So Oregon had a 4 big rotation this year. I thought Dana Altman was masterful in the way that he orchestrated those substitutions. Felt like he always had the right guys playing on the court and the way he would mix and match. Sometimes it was Angel and Cook or Evans and Biddle. Evans and Biddle were kind of the guys late in the game, which is why I think they'll be the starting tandem. I want them to be the starting tandem next year because they have that chemistry between the two of them already with Shelstad too. But they've brought in Devon Pryor, the small forward from Texas. I don't really know what to expect from him because he hasn't been a big scorer or a big player so far yet in his career. But the Shelstad news is massive. Biddle next. That's where my head went. Great. Get Nate Biddle to come back for his last season in college back. Go get the NIL dollars you need. Get him to stay here. Get him in the weight room so he doesn't get pushed around by bigger guys as much. And you have got a big expectation season loading, and you have an even better core of players to pitch to other guys in the transfer portal. Like, hey, look at what we're building. We're bringing back our 2 most important guys, our 2 leading scorers, and that team went to the round of 32, and they were that close to going to the Sweet 16. So, great news on Shelstad. Hopefully more comes along the way. There's going to be a lot of basketball news that rolls in here in the coming weeks. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.